Well, it's great to be with you. Thank you. You know, deserve is kind of a strong word. I really think that transportation broadly is a fundamental to the recovery of the economy. Goods and people need to move for the economy to recover. So I think stimulus directed in the ways to help people move more safely, move more regularly is good use of the money because it will help bring the economy back. So in that sense, I think airlines are in the category of things that make sense for stimulus.
You could argue that, though, Ben, for so many different industries. And what I would say about airlines is why can't they just go to the bond market? I mean, the credit market is wide open. Why do we need to use taxpayer money to go to the airlines and not save it for industries that don't have as much access to the capital markets?
Well, that's a fair point. And I think that the airlines have done a good job of attracting liquidity from the private markets, from the bond market. You've seen very creative collateral used, like frequent flyer programs and gates and slots at airports as collateral. I think that's all true. But the reality is, with the uncertainty of air travel in the future, you just can't have an airline just can't have enough cash right now. And so looking at this as another opportunity makes sense. The other thing that's important is airline employees have to be recurrently trained in their job. So what you don't want is airlines, for example, to be in a position maybe a few months down the road when things might be looking better, and then they're still yet months away from being able to add flights because they have to bring people back, retrain them and such. So keeping people current on payroll is important to keep basically the engine idling so that when the economy is ready to come back, so is the transportation system.
I totally get that, Ben, and we definitely want to make sure that the companies and the services are ready to take off again, quite literally, as soon as the demand is there and that all the staff have their jobs and they're ready to provide those services. But why do the equity holders deserve a second bailout? I'm not even sure they deserved a first bailout, because your starting point with airlines is that they failed to prepare for a rainy day. No one could have predicted the severity of this rainy day, but this was a sector which had excess levels of debt to start with that increased those levels of debt in order to prioritize buybacks to push up the stock price. I mean, it wasn't even a failure to prepare for a rainy day. It was like they went out looking for a rainy day, having cast aside their umbrella. Surely the equity holders don't deserve a second round of bailouts.
I actually think that's a little bit unfair. You're directionally correct. But the fact is that airlines have invested an enormous, over 90% of their free cash flow back into the product. Lots of new airplanes, fuel-efficient airplanes, changes at airports, increases in labor costs. This is all pre-COVID, I'm saying. And share buybacks were a relatively small piece of what airlines did with their cash. Now, admittedly, in hindsight, it would have been better if they hadn't done that. But the fact is, when airlines entered this world, when COVID hit and we saw this precipitous drop in demand, airlines had the strongest balance sheets than they had in their history. And they were actually kind of well positioned to deal with it. The issue was, with the uncertainty of when demand is coming back, you can just never have enough cash because you don't know how much cash you're going to need until things are back. So we can all look at hindsight and say, well, if they had done this or that, but would you have rather that they kept old airplanes and fuel inefficient airplanes and things like that? Because that's where most of the money went, actually.
Yeah. You make a good case, Ben. Thank you very much for joining us to talk about it. I think the biggest question mark is, even if they do get the money, there's no telling when demand is going to come back. Maybe have to wait all the way until a vaccine. Ben Baldanza, thank you.
Thank you very much.